fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections. The result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and peace and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
So before we begin, I just wish to thank all the members for answering the obligation this morning. I know that it's perhaps the first time in some time that the Senate is meeting in August, but obviously there is work to be done. And also, in my absence for the last two meetings, we should just place on record my gratitude to Senator Auburn Hill, who stood in as president. And I did watch the tapes, and I realized that he did the best that he could.
Mr. President, with your permission, I have to say that we did miss you, although, as you said, your deputies performed quite admirably. You will note, while you were watching the Senate, you will see there was no insurrection, so things did proceed very well, but we are delighted to have you back.
Thanks, by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following. Minister Paper number 47, Annual Report of the National Family Planning Board for the financial year 2015-2016, and the report of the National Family Planning Board for the financial year 2015-16. Minister Paper number 48, Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency, Annual Report for the financial year 2009-2010, and the Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency Annual Report for the financial year 2009-2010. Minister Paper number 49, Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency Annual Report for the financial year 2010-2011, and the Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency Annual Report for the financial year 2010-2011. Minister Paper numbers 50 through 53. Cabinet Agenda Issues dated June 3, 10, 17, and 24 of 2019.
Bills brought from the Honorable House of Representatives.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives to the Honorable Senate. I have the honor to advise the Honorable Senate that on the 31st day of July 2019, the House of Representatives agreed to the Senate amendments to the following bills. A bill entitled An Act to Make Provision for the Establishment and Administration of Trusts and for Connected Matters. A bill entitled An Act to Establish a Defined Contribution Pension Scheme for Tourism Workers and Self-Employed Tourism Workers, to be known as the Tourism Workers Pension Scheme, from which is to be paid retirement benefits in respect of each member and ancillary benefits for their beneficiaries and for other connected matters. And 3, a bill entitled An Act to Establish a Body to be called the Information and Communications Technology Authority, to promote improvement in information and communications technology service management in all public bodies, to transfer the functions of eGov Jamaica Limited and the Office of the Chief Information Officer to the Information and Communications Technology Authority, and for connected matters. Signed, Colonel P. Charles, CDJP MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Petitions? Papers, Senator Morris? Reports from committees? Notices of motions given orally. Minister?
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move to introduce and have read for the first time a bill shortly entitled the Sexual Harassment Act 2019. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take first and second reading of the bill, and to move for it to be referred to a special select committee to sit jointly with a similar committee to be appointed by the House for consideration and report.
Questions and answers to questions. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained.
Mr. President, I now move to introduce and have read for the first time a bill shortly entitled the Sexual Harassment Act 2019.
A bill shortly entitled the Sexual Harassment Act 2019 read a first time.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of a second reading of the bill. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take second reading of the bill, and for it to be referred to a select committee to sit jointly with a similar committee appointed by the House of Representatives for consideration and report.
Thank you very much, Minister.
And I ought to have craved your indulgence to be addressing you from a seat that is not my own.
There's a motion. So public business. Public business, Minister.
Mr. President, we have two matters for this Honorable Senate to address today. One relates to the Pensions, Superannuation Funds and Retirement Schemes Act, and the other, as I had just articulated, relates to the Sexual Harassment Act 2019. It's proposed that we will complete the matter in relation to the Select Committee and then move swiftly into the pensions regulations. So, Senators, Mr. President, it is our wish for the bill to be examined by a joint select committee of both houses of Parliament, but before it can be referred to this committee, it must be read a second time. So I now move again for the bill to be read a second time.
A bill entitled An Act to Make Provision for the Prevention of Sexual Harassment and for Connected Matters read a second time.
Mr. President, I now move, be it resolved that this Honorable Senate appoint a special select committee comprising the following members: Senator Cavan Gale, CD, Senator Dr. Sophia Longmore, Senator Carencia Morrison, Senator Donna Scott Motley, Senator Sophia Fraser Binns, to sit jointly with a similar committee appointed by the House of Representatives to consider and report on the bill shortly entitled the Sexual Harassment Act 2019.
Thank you very much. The senators heard the motion. Those in favor? Against? Minister?
Mr. President, as I had indicated, Mr. President, colleagues, the second matter to be completed for us today relates to the Pensions Superannuation Funds and Retirement Schemes Investment Amendment Regulations 2019 resolution. I am going to introduce the matter before us, and then I, of course, await and invite the contributions from my colleagues. Mr. President, colleagues, the matter for consideration is one that is very important to the advancement of economic growth for our country. Mr. President, the Financial Services Commission, who is a regulator of the private pension industry, undertook as part of the Phase 2 pension reform measures a review of the pension superannuation funds and retirement schemes investment regulations, which we'll call hereafter investment regulations. And they did that review taking into account the evolving international standards. This review and consultation with key industry stakeholders was done in order to strengthen the legislative framework with respect to the application of the prudent person rule and to expand the range of permissible investments. The need to expand the range of permissible investments was seen as a priority action to unlock the ability for us to improve the returns for our pensioners and to also provide potential increases in the source of investment capital. As the macroeconomic environment in Jamaica, Mr. President, has improved, and as the government's appetite for debt has gone down, pension funds now have assets which need a home for investment and for increased returns. The scope of their options and opportunities has, however, over time been constrained, and these regulations are intended to release those constraints and strengthen the relevant framework. So, Mr. President, colleagues, there are two things primarily that the regulations aim to do. One is to strengthen the legislative framework with respect to the safeguarding of the assets of the superannuation funds and retirement schemes, and secondly, to expand the range of permissible assets in which the assets of the pension plan can be invested. The need for these amendments to the regulations, as well as the related means of execution, were well researched and carefully considered. The Financial Services Commission was supported by the Caribbean Regional Technical Assistance Center, CARTAC, and underwent capacity building to support the approach that is now being proposed. A pension industry stress testing exercise was also undertaken, which covered the top 20 pension plans by assets. The results show that the aggregate funding ratio for all of these plans remained above 120% under a variety of stress scenarios, assuming that the proposed changes in the quantitative investment limits were implemented. The increased quantitative limits also provided for in the regulations before us today reflect the results of the stress testing exercise and the additional discussions with the Ministry of Finance and Public Service and other policymakers and advisors during a financial sector assessment program exercise. So a lot has gone into the action that is being taken today to ensure that it is the right action. The main proposals contained in the amendment to the investment regulations, and we'll go through. Paragraph 2, as you may have it before you, contains the amendments to Regulation 2, which includes the definition of several important terms, repurchase agreement, type 2 pooled fund, and others. Paragraph 3 seeks to amend Regulation 3, and Regulation 3 currently requires trustees and investment managers to prudently invest and manage the assets of any pension plan under their management in a way that is consistent with the pension plan's statement of investment policies and principles. This paragraph proposes to amend Regulation 3 also to require that the trustees and the investment managers ensure that they invest in a manner that is consistent with the constitutive documents of the pension plan where applicable. Mr. President, this will strengthen the protection of the interests of the participants in the pension plans by heightening the responsibilities of the trustees and investment managers with respect to the investment decisions pertaining particular pension plans. As pension funds differ in the constitution of their members, we know that this is critical. Some have members that have all retired, some have no retirees at all, and so the constitution document has to be arranged and abided by. Paragraph 5, colleagues, seeks to amend Regulation 8 to ensure that when the statement of investment policies and principles are prepared, they are done not only in accordance with the constitutive documents, but also that they comply with the provisions of the acts and these regulations. The provision also stipulates that the statement should include the scope of the discretion, if there is any, which the trustees and investment managers have in investing the assets of the fund or the scheme. Paragraph 6 amends the Regulation 10, and it does so by including additional information which the statement of investment policies and principles needs to contain, such as statements of the management and control of the risk at both the portfolio and the individual level, such as the extent to which the social and the environment or the governance considerations are taken into account, and also the asset liability management strategy for the policy. This is consistent also with international best practice, and that is critical. Paragraph 7, colleagues, amends Regulation 16 by increasing the general consideration limits imposed on certain investments or loans from 5% to 10%. And this is consistent with other jurisdictions such as Canada, and also allows for the responsiveness to the changes in the regulated environment over time and for the tailoring of limits to the specific circumstances of individual plans on a risk basis. The amendment also seeks to clarify that investments made by Type 1 pooled funds are also subject to the concentration limits of this regulation. Paragraph 8 amends Regulation 17, colleagues, Mr. President, by including in the exclusions from the general concentration limits imposed by Regulation 16 certain classes of investments in real property and company and annuities. Paragraph 13 amends Regulation 23 by expanding the corporate obligations that the assets of a fund or scheme may be invested in. Investments will be allowed in obligations other than commercial paper or promissory notes issued by a solvent public company. They'll be allowed in commercial paper or other promissory notes guaranteed by institutions licensed under the Banking Services, Insurance, or Securities Act. And, Mr. President, it should be noted that there is a 5% limit on the investments in obligations which are unsecured, not traded on a recognized stock exchange, or those which have a credit rating below an investment grade. The policy, Mr. President, the policy aim is to broaden the investment opportunities for pension plans, to equalize the treatment of the debt and equity securities of a given entity. And over time, we've had an anomaly in Jamaica, Mr. President, for a long time, where pension funds can invest in stocks through the Jamaica Stock Exchange, but equity in the capital structure of an organization, we know, is the most junior form of security. Debt securities are more senior and have much more of a claim on the assets of a company whenever something goes wrong, if there's a downside scenario. Yet, we have allowed our pension funds to invest in equity and not in debt of publicly listed companies. So this amendment to the regulation really treats with, gets rid of that anomaly and equalizes the treatment for listed companies. It also incentivizes greater transparency and price discovery in debt markets. As a safeguard, however, where the debt is neither traded on a recognized stock exchange nor has a certain investment grade, Mr. President, rating fund, or a scheme is not permitted to invest more than 5% of its aggregate in that regard. Mr. President, this amendment is crucial, and it is one which we have to understand. It's an amendment that will introduce more competition in the market for debt. Companies which are seeking to borrow funds for expansion will now not only be confined to the banking market, but they will have a great opportunity, colleagues, to access the capital market. Because pension funds which were previously restructured from participating in that market will now, Senator Gale, be able to participate with a much greater degree of flexibility. Moving on to paragraph 15, Mr. President. Paragraph 15 amends the regulations by inserting a new regulation, 24A. And regulation 24A will permit pension plans to invest both equity and debt securities in a private company established under the laws of Jamaica, or other specialized investment vehicle established under the laws of Jamaica, whose shares or ownership interests are not publicly traded on a recognized stock exchange up to 5%. The regulation also prohibits investment in foreign private companies. Mr. President, this amendment sets to usher in a new day in Jamaica pension funds. Once this is passed, we will see for the first time that we're able to invest in private equity and venture capital, which will allow our young entrepreneurs to have access to a stream of investment that they did not have access to before. This is very important, Mr. President, for us to all appreciate, because it is critical as we are making it easier to access finance for businesses, as well as opening up the opportunity for pension funds to invest in high returning investments. However, there's always need for this judicious balance, Mr. President, and so to ensure that prudent decisions are made, there is a limit, and that limit is not more than 5% of the assets in a pension fund. Mr. President, paragraph 17 replaces Regulation 26, and the new Regulation 26 stipulates that private companies established for the sole purpose of holding real estate assets of pension plans will be exempted from the 30% cap on voting shares, the threshold limit stipulated by this regulation. It should be noted, Mr. President, that it may be in the best interest of the pension plan to hold majority voting shares in this instance. They may prefer to hold a building through a company and not to be artificially limited by the amount of shares they can hold in that company that owns the building. So it will also ensure that the management structures put in place by the trustees solely to manage the real estate portfolios are not unnecessarily restricted. Moving to paragraph 22, colleagues, you will see that it inserts a new regulation 30A which permits pension plans to invest in annuities. Paragraph 25 deletes the current regulation 33 and replaces it with two separate provisions, which is a new regulation 33 which addresses leases and a regulation 33A which addresses other investments. Mr. President, this decoupling allows for an increase of the investment concentration limit for secured collateralized leases from 5% to 10%. In relation to any other investments, the limits will remain at not exceeding 5%. Mr. President, again, more competition in the market for leases. Leases, we know, serve as a primary form of financing for a lot of companies that have equipment, and this now allows for pension funds to enter that market to a greater degree than they have before. Paragraph 26. Paragraph 26, Mr. President, amends Regulation 35. Regulation 35, which stipulates the prohibited investments and transactions. The amendment removes the restriction on investments in unsecured loans, which are expressly permitted by the regulations. It also stipulates that the assets of pension plans should not be invested in the speculative investments unless such investments are permitted under the regulations and where those investments are within the risk appetite of the fund or the scheme and its investment policy and strategy. I'll have to look. It is expected, colleagues, Mr. President, that the trustees, in permitting unsecured investments in a fund or scheme portfolio, will have in place appropriate due diligence processes for executing their fiduciary duties. Mr. President, I at this time invite my colleagues to make their contribution prior to closing, and I know that there will be wide support for the regulation, and I want to take the opportunity just to also thank the team that worked very hard on putting this together, Mr. President, the Financial Services Commission and the Ministry of Finance, all of the team from the Chief Parliamentary Council and others, and to just state that as our Minister of Finance did in the lower house, there's significant contribution from the opposition. In particular, he also highlighted that there were several rounds of exchanges that made for good suggestions, which ensures that the regulation before us is one that arises from great collaboration. I invite my colleagues to speak.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Marshall, help me.
Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown.
recognizing that there was some input in the lower house by the shadow spokesperson on finance, MP Mark Golding. And those suggestions apparently found its way into the current regulations. That's good. But it would be better, in my view, if the consultation moved beyond parties and beyond members of the House to the trustee, the worker trustees in these schemes, to the broad group of pensioners, because this regulation is a fundamental departure from what was there before. We are not going to be negative about it, but it is going to affect significant members of the society who are the productive sector, because it is the workers and the people in pension who often contribute most to the productive and the production of our country. So I'd have preferred, Senator Charles, if the discussion was wider, given the implications of these regulations. And I also wish to ask you very early whether or not there's a definition of speculative schemes, because that's important, because we're saying people shouldn't get into speculative schemes, but they don't know what is a speculative scheme if there is no definition of it. It's going to be left up to everybody to decide. Mr. President, I hear the promise of $30 to $50 billion being released and available for investment under these regulations. But I've come to learn that while we can't amend these regulations here, I've come to learn also that I shouldn't jump to promises too quickly. The number of people or the percentage of the population in pension scheme is less than 10%. Less than 10%. So yes, it appears to affect a small amount of people, but very important, because we're looking at a pension asset pool of about $600 billion. So it's important that we treat this resolution with all seriousness. And this is why I want to thank you personally, Minister Charles, for facilitating the debate on the regulation. Had we gone last week to do it when the opposition wouldn't be prepared, wasn't prepared, it certainly would not be beneficial to the society, and would lose at least the benefit of public education on the pension scheme and the importance of pension and retirement scheme to the country. I thank you. I am happy that we didn't go for the 1 hour discussion on Wednesday, because how could we discuss such an important issue in a rush hour on Wednesday? So I want to thank you very much for facilitating this debate. Mr. President, too few Jamaicans are in pension schemes. Too few. The tourism pension thing worked on by the previous administration and this administration will be the largest pension scheme in the country, surpassing even the NIS, which is supposed to be mandatory. But notwithstanding that, too few people are in pension scheme. And the country is going to suffer in the end because more people are not in pension and retirement schemes. This is why, Mr. President, on the order paper of this Senate, resolution number 3, notice of which was given on the 2nd of December 2016 by me, needs to be debated. It needs to be debated. There can be no good reason why an important resolution like this, except for the fact that I move it, is not being discussed. This is too important to the country's economy. And I'm begging the government to put before the end of the year, don't make it 3 years of sitting on the table. Just move on the 2nd of December 2016. I'm begging the government to debate the resolution which calls for us to encourage savings and pension schemes and retirement schemes. It called for a select committee to be established to propose ways and means to encourage greater participation of the population in pension schemes and retirement. What, Mr. President, could prevent this from being debated here? I won't ascribe any motive, but I'd urge the government side in your caucuses to implore and the leader of government business to bring this resolution quickly to the Senate for debate. It makes sense. It makes sense, and I ask for that. Mr. President, out of such a debate, we might spur other people to become involved in pension. The security guards, 25,000 of them out there. Why are they not in a pension scheme? Why can't we do something for them? Just as Portia Simpson-Miller, as Minister of Labour, ensure an insurance scheme to protect them. It's time for us to look at them, look at the minimum wage workers, and see if we can create up some pool of funds to get a pension scheme for them. If we don't do this, the state is going to have to pick up the tab at the end of the day. Let us be proactive. Let us find ways to do it. As Peter Phillips led the improvement in the economy, let's find some resources out of that, rather than people being greedy to use it for the needy. That's what we need. And so I'm proposing that at the next review of the minimum wage, which affects security guard minimum wage, that the Ministry of Labour creatively seek to introduce a pension scheme for the lowest level of workers in the country. Let's think about it. Newland and others in the 60s were able to come up with the NIS. 50 odd years of NIS, time to review it. Time to see the weaknesses and how we can rebrand and reposition it from the current deficit situation to a creative thing which takes care of the vulnerable in our society. Michael Manley did it with the creative thinking out of the box for the National Housing Trust. In St. William, some of the guards now are paying 3% for housing trust more than an ordinary worker because employers have sought to use the contract label and to say they are not workers. So they are paying more to the NHC than they should be paying. That is those who are paying. We can find a way to pull some of those funds that they are overpaying into a pension arrangement to protect them. So we're talking about how we can improve a pension situation for the vulnerable in this society. And I make that proposal for the Ministry of Labour to look at. Because if they don't, when my side come back, I'll be insisting that they do so. Another issue I want to raise, Minister.
You won't have to wait for long.
It won't be long, man. They know, and they know too. They know too. Mr. President, it's important that this discussion and the issue I raise about the vulnerable, that it takes place against a certain background. The background, since you asked me which side, of one side promising from poverty to prosperity, Senator Hill. But the reality of the first 2 years of this government is that poverty has increased. Let me say it again. The reality is that of this government, the first 2 years, poverty have increased.
Hey, you used to buy 20 suits, you have more than one.
Did I hear somebody say, KD, did I hear somebody say, no data? Because I'm waiting for my friend to get up on a point of order.
No,
See, Mr. President?
No.
Tabled in this Senate this morning. Tabled in this Senate this morning is Ministry Paper 51 of 2019. Cabinet Agenda issues 10th June 2019. Under the signature of the Most Honorable Prime Minister. This is what it said in part. Analysts of the 2017 poverty rate. Cabinet considered a report from the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service on poverty rates for 2017, calculated from the Jamaica Survey of Living Condition, JSLC data. So coming from the data, Senator Hill. We read on this side, you know. The reporting, this is what Cabinet is saying to the House. The report informed that in 2017, the economy grew by 1% and registered an increase in the number of people employed by 26,200 by July 2017.
You accept that part, don't you?
And then it continued.
You accept that part?
But despite the positive outturn, the overall poverty rate increased by 2.2 percentage points to 19.3 compared to 17.1% recorded in 2016.
You accept part for the paragraph, you know?
Due to increases in the Kingston metropolitan area, KMA, and other towns. Mr. President, the report from the Prime Minister and matters from Cabinet continued. The report further informed that the regional poverty rates were 17.1% for the KMA and 20.1% in other towns and rural areas, respectively. The overall increase in poverty reflected regional increases of 5.2 percentage points in the KMA and 4.1 percentage points in other towns. And conversely, the poverty rate recorded for rural areas was similar to the rate recorded in the previous year, that is 20.1% in 2017 compared to 20.5% in 2016. And this is what the Prime Minister continued to say in his report to the House. The report also informed that the KMA, after recording declines for 4 consecutive years, 4 consecutive years from 2017, we'll take it to 2013. We were there then. So it was reducing then, but it continues.
As a change guy.
The report also informed that the KMA, after recording declines for 4 consecutive years, registered the largest increase in poverty, reflecting a decline in mean per capita consumption in real terms by 30%. And an increase in poverty was recorded for other towns for the 2nd consecutive year,
No prosperity in the city, man.
which worsened the standard of living in that region. It is advised that despite a contraction in the agricultural sector due to severe flooding in 2017, rural area poverty remained stable at 20.1%, and noted that the measures introduced by the government assisted in curtailing the increase in poverty rate.
People are poor. Who signed that again?
Then it says, Mr. President, the Honourable House is asked to note the foregoing. Andrew Holness MP, Prime Minister,
Who signed again?
July 2019.
Who?
Prime
Who
Minister Andrew Holness.
Okay, sure.
So the data is here.
So you
Problem is
can,
that you don't look for it.
so you confirm no prosperity.
So, and other towns,
City getting poorer on the labor.
and other towns. So the government were debating this pension issue and the background of poverty increasing instead of prosperity for the people. So I put that out there because, Mr. President, if you promise prosperity, you ought not to be giving the people
Yeah,
poverty
man. Just like you want me to sleep with the window and doors open.
and the corruption thing.
Right.
Promises broken. Mr. President, another era that I hope would have been addressed by the regulations, Senator Charles, is the issue of retirement age. Retirement age. Connected to pension, right? Retirement age. Right. Senator Brown,
you know,
Senator Gill,
if you're poor, the money can't spend.
people ask you regular as they do, ask me, what is the retirement age? When I can retire? People ask that question. I don't think we have a national retirement age. We know judges at by law at 70 or whatever. We know some people in the public sector at 60. We know some at 65. And of course, politicians don't retire. They have to get wheelchair for them. Or wheelbarrow. But the issue is, isn't it time for us to settle on a national retirement age? So it doesn't move from trust deed to trust deed, pension contract to pension contract. Recently, Mr. President, the Parliament in Bermuda, the Assembly, unanimously approved a retirement age of 68 for everybody. I'm not saying it should be 68, but I'm saying it's something we must consider. Too often people come to me, I'm asked to retire at age 60, but I can't get my NIS pension until age 65. Yeah. What do I do between 60 and 65? Sorry, Senator? It's something we need to resolve.
Yeah. Seriously, sure.
And we come here in support of the regulation. But we must address some of the issues flowing from it.
So don't fret, Minister, we support it.
Right? The FSC and others need to work with us. And we in the Parliament need to resolve what is a national retirement age.
Yeah,
we need to do that. Others are doing it, we need to do it. Mr. President, there's an article in the papers today about
Senator Brown,
Sir?
as a matter of interest, what age you would...
I don't come here,
No, as a matter
I come here with
of
an open mind. Because I look at a society that is aging, I look at a lot of young people coming and say, if you hold the position, and then what about me? It's a national discussion on it, which is part of why my motion move tabled in 2016 December should be debated. And I'm seeking your support, Mr. President, in getting the House Leader to put that on the agenda. Let us debate this thing. Let us see how we can improve the country. Because when I sent, there's an article about pension in today's Gleaner, which I sent out this morning to a number of persons. And they all responded. All of them recognize that there's a risk involved with this. But making a fundamental change. There are risks. And yes, risks are necessary to be taken. But risks also have downsides that we must look at. We have seen in this country the financial sector meltdown. We have seen in the United States, in Asia, in other countries. It's not unique to us. What if there's a meltdown in this country? What will happen to the pension schemes and the pensioners? Have they been given sufficient thought to how we're going to protect the pensioners? I am proud to say FinSA was the tool used to save people insurance and their pension saving in the 90s. That's what FinSA was about, a vehicle to save workers. I remember being with Minister Davis at Jamalco during the meltdown. When the workers impressed upon him, what is going to happen to my savings? Senator Brown, I was in Trinidad one time when his vehicle crashed and people driving them car and them license gone, them registration and insurance gone. Just so. We have to ask what protection is there in this for those pensioners whose money will be invested into some of these schemes. Granted, not the whole 600 million. Maybe 30. Maybe billion. Maybe 30, maybe 50. But we need to ask what protection is there for them. See, Senator Gill, most of the schemes have now gone to what they call CD. Right? So that you are DC, defined contribution. Defined contribution. That is to say, whereas, like the government, you get a certain amount when you retire, they say you will only get what your money can buy.
Which is madness.
Which is what your money can buy. Whereas, so, if these schemes were a defined benefit scheme, it would mean that the employers who sponsor these schemes would have to put the money in and take the risk. And they would probably oppose what is happening now as they did in the past. So, now that most of the schemes are defined contribution, DC schemes, the risk pass Senator Gill to the members of the BITU, the UAW, the NW, UKIS, Civil Service Association, to the people who we represent as workers. So, the issue is, what protection are there in the regulation? I heard the minister's speech in Parliament during the budget, but I still don't feel the consultation with the unions and with others as we rush to open the sesame without me seeing the protection. Let me give you an example, Minister. Clause 36A, the last one on the page, on the thing, says essentially that upon a person ceasing to be an investment manager of a fund or scheme, that person shall provide the trustees of that fund or scheme with the investment records kept on behalf of the trustees in relation to the fund. What if they don't do it? What if the investment manager don't do it? What happens? What happens if they're vexed that we have salary issues? What if they're vexed and it doesn't pass it over? You go to court and a long drawn out thing. I mean, take Marilyn Hamilton versus UJI. She got fired in 2006 and her case is still going through the system today. Or take what I saw in the Contractor General first report, in the Integrity Commission first report. They're waiting a decision on a judicial review point since 2013, 6 years ago. How can that be? How can that be? You're waiting judgment 6 years because it's not my union, it's big people business. So the silence may be beneficial to those who challenge. I don't know. But it doesn't look right for it to take 6 years. So in respect to 36A, that is a new clause to go into the regulation. What penalty flows from it? A failure to do it. So I'm talking about protection for those who have to take risks. Protection for the workers. So we agree with the regulations generally, but it can be better. It can be. President, another area that this hasn't touched really, having to do with surplus. Could go both ways. Surplus may diminish or the surplus may increase from the risk taken. What has been happening in the country, President, is a lot of people coming out of pension schemes. Wholesale redundancy. There's a company, for example, that had about 4,000 employees, now down to 500 or thereabout, or even less. That's a lot of pension money built up over years. Take another one we saw the court pronounce on recently, Alcon, where the sponsors want a bag of the money and the court is saying, no, let the workers get a bag. But I'd love to hear those who are regulating our pension address that issue of surplus.
Yes.
especially against the background of that case, Air Jamaica case, which went all the way to the Privy Council. That's a long time. Joy has died. Joy Charlton, you know her. She led that fight all the way to the Privy Council to protect the pensioners. It's time that those who are dealing with this address the issue of surplus. How surplus must be decided. Because the workers get shafted too often. Right? There are many. I could go, people come to me. St. Thomas, Spanish Town Road. What do we do? Given the good work that the leaders of the trade union movements have carried out to put in pension scheme, no employers are backing out from them. And looking to gobble up the surplus. We must protect the workers. And Senator Gill, in this, you and I have a duty. We must encourage the workers, especially those who have been made redundant, to leave some of the money in the pension scheme. I need applause for that. I need applause for that. I need the workers of this country to know that taking all the money, just leave the surplus to the employer. All the contribution of the employer just stay there, and then they find a way to take it out. Whereas, and sadly enough, I've seen workers who redundant many years ago come to me and say, what about pension now? Because I'm reached 60 odd now. And I say, did you leave your money there? No. So you and I, Senator Gale, and the rest of us in the movement, we'll have to educate workers that it is important that you leave a little piece in the pension fund. So when time comes, you can get something. Because the truth be told, I had a discussion, Senator Skeffrey, with my wife one day this week. She said to me, a good friend of ours now finds herself in a position where she has to be buying quarter of the medication president prescribed by the doctor. So instead of taking 2 pills, they're taking half a pill. We are killing them. We are killing them. So we have to find a way to tell the younger generation that a future is coming when they are going to be a little older than they are today. We have to tell them that they are going to be a little older. And it is important, therefore, that they prepare for the future. And all of us in the Senate, all of us in this House, in the Parliament, need to go on a crusade to do that. It benefits the country by the saving. I grew up in the era, President, of penny banks. Don't know if you know that, because you will have put in more than penny. More than put in penny. But penny banks encourage a habit of saving. We have to make our people financially literate. We have to tell them that a house was sale so many years ago at $15,000 will become 1 week's paycheck later on in life. Invest in it. Invest in it. In due course, you will find the mortgage easy. And even so today at some of the rates. But we have to get our people, especially the middle class and the poor, to see investment opportunities in the country. Pension is but one of them. Pension is but one such thing. And which is why, again, I plea, not for partisan sake, to the government side. Let's discuss the pension thing in the interest of Jamaica, to the benefit of Jamaica. Let's put the resolution on the floor and let's just discuss it. So, Mr. President, I want to urge as we look at private pensioners, because in the government, Senator Sinclair, Senator Charles, is going eventually to set up a fund in which they are going to contribute for public sector pension. And that is also a defined contribution scheme. And what we are going to have to ask, because how do we protect the vulnerable? JADEP came about to help ease the medical costs. One of the biggest costs to pensioners now is medical bills. Medical bills. Added to that, the water rate and the light bill keep going up. I don't know how the pensioners survive. But for the mercies of the Father and for some children. But not every one of them have children. So I'm going to urge the government, another suggestion I want to make to the government. So it's not said that the opposition don't make suggestions. I ask the Ministry of Health and Labour, to look at the impact of the current economic policies and pensioners. So we know we're starting with people over 60. So we're not asking for everybody.
I can't tell you.
Ask for such a study to be done to see whether or not, as part of so-called free health, we can free up the cost of medication to the elderly. I don't know what the cost is going to be, but let's just discuss it and see, for example, if that worker who worked 20 or 30 years in government or in general, if we can't find a model which says, whether through the National Health Fund, which is already subsidized, don't get me wrong, but we can do better. Because it can't be, the measure of a country, not a party, our country, is how we treat the vulnerable and the young people. And I believe we can do something. We ought to do something for those who can't get the full medication only because of the deficiency of their pension. So I'm not asking you to up the pension, though that would be good. That would be good. But we can do other things. We can do it by subsidy of the health needs. And we, National Health Fund, I know, have a list of everybody, Mr. President, who reach 65. When I reach, it was 60, them send me quick, a card. But some of you don't reach at 18, so you can't get the card. But they are efficient.
Oh, I know 60 is yours.
60. So this is why I want us to agree on a national retirement age. I'm wrapping up.
Mr. President, the Speaker's time having passed 60 minutes. Sorry, 30 minutes.
I'm wrapping.
You want to give 60 minutes? It's so good.
I'm wrapping.
We ask that he has sufficient time to complete his presentation.
You have heard the question. Those in favor? Senator.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wrapping up. So that proposal is something practical. We can't amend the regulations, but we can work on it. And I don't claim paternity for it. I'll be happy if you do it. Because again, if you don't do it, we are going to do it. You may think so. You may you all may think so. But if it takes you that long to do it, we will still do it. So this is why I'm saying, do it early. Mr. President, as I said, Clause 36A, need a sense of what happens there. Speculative scheme, what is the definition for it? Mr. President, we should all read the matter from Cabinet. This one, when I was told of it on Tuesday, when it was tabled in the House, I had to ask for photocopy of it. No, the same Ministry Paper 51 of 2019, Cabinet issues the 10th of June. Because given the way my friends on the other side have been preaching the prosperity gospel, I did not expect to see the Prime Minister say poverty has been increasing. No, while before it was decreasing.
No, it increased in 2015.
So I am wary of the promises that this bill is going to do great things. But I am prepared, Minister, to watch it from a critical support element, because this, like other things you have done, may appear have good intentions, but the road to hell is off paved with that stuff. I'm disappointed, however, I must say, as I take my seat, Mr. President, as disappointed that I didn't get a single point of order. Because I've set up my speech. To quote Cory Booker, to tell a certain senator, to tell a certain senator that you're dipping into the Kool-Aid and you don't even know the flavor. But I didn't get a chance to do it because I was armed with this ministry paper, which said otherwise. So, Mr. President, may it please you, the opposition supports the regulation. We urge caution and we urge fundamental pension reform to come sooner. Portability, for example, is an issue that has to be addressed. But as we say, we thank you for facilitating the debate and allowing ideas to flow today rather than rush it. And I make a simple plea to those on your side. Compromise.
Yes, ma'am.
Stretching across the aisles is a good thing. It's a sign of strength, not weakness.
Make a plea for President to lead more of the city.
May the spirit that you brought to this debate and the conduct of the Senate, may it permeate, may it dominate, and may it be the spirit of the government side going forward. May it please you, Mr. President.
I move that motion national.
Yeah, man, that's it. Thank you.
Come on, we have a plate to catch it.
Senator Brown. Thank you. Senator Gale.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, it's strange, Mr. President, because Senator Brown got the opportunity to speak for almost 2 hours. And did well. Without a point. Can you imagine that? But the thing about it is that, and it's a good thing, President, when we spoke about the tourism pension, it took nothing for us to find agreement on it. And today, we're speaking incidentally on a regulation. Because if we check the practice, you know, we never normally debate regulations. And regulations can't be amended. But it doesn't stop us, President, from making recommendations as to how we can treat with future regulations and amendments. And pension is so important. It's an issue that I consider it sacrosanct. But it requires attention, and it's something that as a country we don't pay much attention to. So I'm happy today for the opportunity to participate in this debate. Senator Brown raised some very important points. He spoke about the lack of consultation around this particular regulation. I'm advised that there were some consultations. There were consultations involving trustees, fund managers, investment managers. But the consultation must be extended more than that and not just limited to this aspect of the regulation. Because, President, pension reform is very important. There are some important factors that ensures the success of pension funds. The ability to entertain and to have sound, practical investment. But also, there is no pension fund that is going to survive without the ability to increase not only the contributors, but also contributions. So this is treating with the investment part of it. But we have to look at the need to increase contributors to a pension fund. And given the global environment, Mr. President, we are operating in a competitive environment, a very competitive marketplace that is going to require us to amend policies, amend regulations, and amend just the plan rules and the trust deeds. You have situations where trust deeds would have been established and keep operating on the same trust deed over many years while the environment changes. And so that's not good for pension. And it should be part of the pension reform. So, President, this regulation gives the fund managers the room to invest in a wider range of foreign assets and outside of the local market. It provides changes that now allows pension funds to participate in the growth not only of this economy, but also other economies. There are some over 800 pension funds that has a value of almost 600 billion. So that sounds like a whole heap. A lot of pension funds, $600 billion, but a small percentage of the workforce contributing to private pension schemes. And that's alarming because we run the risk in this country now, Mr. President, that when workers retire, you know, you're a retiree, but you're not a pensioner. You're a retiree, but you're not a pensioner. And that's the two should go hand in hand. So you work today for those golden years. And when you leave, you walk out and there is no return on that investment. So we must take this thing of saving for that, whether you want to call it rainy day or sunshine, we must save for our retirement. Mr. President, no matter how small it is, as a country, we must develop a culture of savings. Senator Brown spoke about, you know, the cost for someone who has retired. So imagine that day when you leave the workplace. You go home, and in the solace of your home, some might still have mortgage. Yes, you still have a mortgage on the house. Because the NHT Act allows you up to 65 to be able, you leave at 65.
And it don't must be an NHT pension either.
Sorry?
It don't must be an NHT
No,
mortgage.
it don't must be an NHT
Mortgage.
mortgage. It don't must be an NHT mortgage. There's a question of the fuel charge, the utility bills, the transportation, the food. And what you need most at that age is the question of health provision. When I was growing up, you hear about, boy, my picnic them will look after me. Your picnic them need looking after. And picnic, Senator Morris advised me that picnic is not pension. But it's a serious thing. So we must promote this culture of saving for retirement. Now, what this is seeking to do is to strengthen the regulatory framework. And there's always the need for that. Regulatory frameworks have to be strengthened to ensure governance, to ensure that sustainability. But you have to look at the role of the players, the role of the employer, the role of the governing body, the role of the regulators, the role of the advisors, the lawyers, the actuaries, the investment members. Mr. President, let us accept and agree on one thing. No government can stand the cost of savings for its people upon retirement. But it doesn't mean that we can't put measures in place to protect workers. Senator Brown, you raised the point about the defined contribution as opposed to the defined benefit. Most of the employers now, they are transitioning. They even start, I've seen where some have a defined contribution scheme. They have a defined contribution scheme and they want to maintain pension, so they move and set up another scheme for workers coming in. No, they have the defined benefit. And they move and transition for the workers coming in to have defined contribution. Because what it means to them, they don't want to commit to the long-term viability and sustainability and putting money into defined benefits. Now coming to that, I'm coming to that. Because I can't leave that out of my presentation. Now, it is a good move. It is a good move by the minister to treat with these regulations. It's a good move because the minister recognized that there's the need to change. But the consultation of reform has to take place. The National Insurance Fund that treats with the NIS fund, up to June, it's doing well at 128 billion. Up to June. But there are concerns. There's concern about contributors. Because if you don't have contributors flowing into a fund, it's not going to be sustainable. The challenge you have is our employment practice, where you have the difficulty in getting the contribution from source. Meaning, when you pay the worker, that contribution is going to be automatic in the fund. But if you have a situation, President, where your employment practice says to you, you will have a treat with making your contribution. You are going to have to find the time to go make the contribution. Now, as a new employee. Now, I have seen contracts that suggest that, yes, you're paid X. These are your terms and conditions of employment. But then it says, hold on a minute. You are required to go make your contribution to the National Housing Trust and NIS. Now, that exposes those workers. It exposes those workers because they don't even have the time to go make the contribution. You don't have the ability to even have the matching portion being contributed. So at the end of the day, out of the labor force, a great percentage of workers is not contributing to any retirement benefit because of the employment practice. And so we have to review whether or not we want to continue. And I'm strongly recommending that we must make changes of our employment practices to protect workers. There are some cultures that we have to promote, you know. We have to have a public education, make workers know the need to be part of saving for retirement. And this should be upon entry to our workforce. We also have to talk about the financial literacy. What it means. What it means that, listen, put on some money, don't go seek for buy motor car. And the young workers today, Mr. President, they want immediate returns. But we have to culture their mind against saving for retirement. We also have to put in place, Mr. President, mechanisms and options for the ease of payment. And I'm more one, you know, that would more prescribe not this thing not being voluntary, but mandatory. Mandatory in terms of savings for retirement. And so if we want to talk about regulations, that is what we must regulate, so that workers upon retirement is not a burden to anybody. There's some return that they should get. So we did 2 weeks ago a large section of workers into a formal system, the tourism workers. But we have some other workers. Senator Brown spoke about the security guards. And every security guard, them say to you, you know, why, what is it that you can do for us in this system for savings? So there's a large pool of workers that is going to be dependent on the state. We need to treat with that. But one of the things we can do is that we can organize the informal sector to structure it in such a way that they too can contribute. The taxi men, those in transport service, we can. So what it is calling for is not a situation where there are consultation taking place just among fund managers and actuaries and lawyers and accountants, but include us, like the trade unions, who know what it means when a worker don't have anything. Know when a worker leave and go home, and some of us have to go assist that worker. Now, I share the understanding with you because they come to me too. When I must retire. When I must retire. We need to settle that. You talk about 60 for women and 65 for men, and you have some women who want to go to 65. You have some, because of the longevity, would be desirous of going to 70. But you see, the key thing about it, is that what that part of it does really. You return on your pension, you get the lump sum. And so you can invest the lump sum. And you get the monthly payment. But whilst you invest the lump sum, that is to stay there. But the monthly payment can't really meet the demand. I know, but you see, if you could get better interest. But that is why I prescribe longer working time. Longer working time. Because you have persons who still can add some value to the workforce. Still can have some value to the workplace. So why leave? And then we must not promote this thing, No, she's not interrupting me. She's supporting me today. Eh? No. You see, I know when she's setting me up. There's a difference to her voice when she's setting me up. I have not yet detected that. And I'm saying it to protect myself. But listen, one of the things is that we need to also settle is the question of portability. So, for whatever reason, you decide you're part of a pension scheme and you are being terminated from your employment. And it could be either you volunteer to leave or it's involuntary. They make your position redundant. And workers get their money but does nothing with it. But they may move on to another job. So portability is important because it ensures continuity. And I hate the idea, President, when, workers, I see them, them get redundant and position, they move on, them take the money and them go buy taxi and put it on road. And they take the money and do some unwise thing with it that can't be mentioned here. But we must treat with the whole question of portability. I don't know why we're afraid of it. It has been recommended by the trade unions to treat with it. So, Mr. President, whilst today we're treating with a regulation that gives the opportunity for growth and further investment and the run of the role and function of fund managers and investment, there are some other peculiarities with pension that must be treated with and must be treated with immediate haste in a comprehensive mode. And so, Mr. President, I support the intent of these regulations. But I'm also looking forward to other regulations that protect the working class. May it please you, Mr. President.
Well done, Cameron. Sounds like you have the entire
Yes, that's why I have to cut it short.
No. No,
I have to cut it short. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gill.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Crawford.
Mr. President, just recently we have been informed, as has been highlighted by Senator Brown, that poverty has increased in Jamaica as high as 19.3%. I want to take a look a second to say what that means, Mr. President. It means that approximately 521,000 Jamaicans, 521,000 Jamaicans are living on less than $250 a day. Jamaican dollars, 250 Jamaican dollars. It means that the water they consume, the electricity that they consume, we don't go so far yet. That 3 meals a day, they have less than $100. But it means, as Senator Gill says, that the picnic can't be the pension, because the picnic need a pension. So we're in a circumstance that we have almost 1 in every 5 Jamaican living on less than 250 Jamaican dollars a day.
Wow, shame.
It is no wonder that JPS continue to say people thief in line. It's no wonder Water Commission continue to say they're losing how much water? Non-revenue water.
Remember their past, we have no NWC.
What does that mean? It means that those who are of working age in this 521,000 cannot contribute to a pension. And not only they cannot contribute to a pension, they are currently earning this $200 a day, likely from physical labor. So it means there will become a time that they can provide that physical labor. Anybody who have a construction site, you will see some 60-year-old come up here asking for a job. And if you have kindness in your heart, to give him a day. But by the half day, you say him can't manage this job.
If you have kindness, you pay him.
But his only experience is muscle work. And by biological design.
That's what everyone's pushing work over there. You know this.
Well, yeah. But uncle, understand the context that I'm setting. I hear we're talking about pension. I don't want to talk about pension in itself. I want to talk about the regulation. But I'm going to say something. Have we defined what is the reasonable income based on our history, our culture, our circumstance, or our cost structures for a person in retirement? Because I don't even want to say a person. Most Jamaicans, even after 65, have a cost to residency. When I say cost to residence, I mean, I understand mortgage now. I thought mortgage would not have been. But most of us don't reach mortgage or rent. And if that cost exists, what should be the pension? Have we looked at the likely ailments? Because we keep saying they need medicine. But what are the ailments and what are the costs of those medicines? To say that then the average Jamaican hypertension, diabetes, arthritis as a cancer now, I raise its head in a way. Where I went to a symposium, mayor, and they said that cancer can lead to a cost of $7 million for that short period of time. Now remember, we said they're living on less than $250 a day. If they're diagnosed with cancer, that's it. Because he has never seen $7 million in all his days. Understand what we're saying? So when I hear we say we're doing all these things, and we're doing a lot of things, the question I have to ask is, who are we doing it for? And that's the question I ask about this regulation. Who is this regulation for? Because when I listen to the minister, and I listen to some communication, it sounds like it is to make money available for investments. The regulation don't sound to me as if it is for the pensioner. Because when you look at it, we're overstating the benefits to the pensioner and we're underestimating the negatives to the pensioner. So when I say 30 billion become available, that is not to the worker. That is to the borrower, the people who want 30 billion to borrow. From that time, we start to wonder, who is this regulation for? Who is it for? Because the money that they highlight is not that the pensioner will start to earn more upon retirement. They highlight that the business will have money to borrow. And when I look at it, Senator Hill, there was a time, yeah, because I like your attention. But you see, there was a time, as a pensioner, yes, there was a time, Senator Braham, that you were correct, that once a business is established, then employment is almost automatic. There was a time. But no, you know, I have an automatic Folco. I have a Folco that collect the egg, feed the fowl, and remove the litter. If I should, no muscle necessary. You hire somebody to one and teeth a fowl, but at the end of the day, if I expand, well, it's totally automatic. I can expand 3-4 folds and don't hire one more person. There was a time that trickle down was factual because in an effort to make profit, you almost automatically had to make other people benefit. That's not so now. The factory that was built in 1980 hired 100 people, now hiring 2 people. Mechanization and automation. And so, when we check this out, it says in the regulation 5% will be allowed to go into more risky investments. And those more risky investments include like bonds, from private sector bonds. And people praise it because they say government not lending as it used to. There was an anomaly within Jamaica where government not borrowing as it used to. Anomaly used to exist in Jamaica that you have low risk, high returns from government. So you just chill out, you know your money sure and get high returns. So that cut out and pension used to benefit from that. So they're saying no, that the pension can't benefit from that, so therefore he should seek greater returns. But you will tell them, Senator Horton, that greater returns come with greater risk. That's right. Senator Gale, you know what they define risk as saying? Exposure to danger. That greater risk means a higher level of exposure to negative outcomes.
Only the workers will suffer.
No, that is the point. But you heard me. If the risk taken, not by the worker, because the worker don't have control. In fact, a lot of time the worker don't have knowledge. The negatives of the risk, the exposure to greater danger, falls only to the man who never take the decision. That's why the role of government is really to protect the pensioner. That at the point that they have a pension, what we are doing now is to set up some companies to have so much debt to pensioners that they're too big to fail. America had to bail out some to bail out the pensioner. FinZac had to bail out some to bail out the pensioner.
And some declare bankruptcy and pay only a small part.
All right. So therefore, I'm going to look at the next risk now. It says, how is it that they can go into the stock, but they can't go into the bonds? And in this case, the person who have the bonds, he have right of, he have first claim. It means that if the company should become bankrupt, he have first claim on his assets. Now I'm asking, because I don't know for sure, I've been researching, I couldn't find it. If a company goes into the private bond market, Star Economist, its assets, can they still be used as collateral for a loan from the bank? Because if its assets can be used for collateral for a loan from the bank, then the bank actually have first claim upon that asset. Because the bank owns that asset as collateral. So if I, as a company, issue private bonds, then it means that me can free up my building. Having freed up my building, I then go to the bank and offer the building as collateral. When me go bankrupt, God forbid, knock on wood, the pension don't have first claim now. It is the bank. So selling it as almost automatic, you have to get back your money is not true. If the question I ask, the response is in the affirmative. So we're overselling the benefits. I also think we're overselling the benefits because at the margin, 5% can't really change the circumstance of the penny. It's available for companies to borrow. 50 billion available for pension to invest. That's not a whole heap for pensions to invest. You see, what you do is sell a big number when a man hear him say 50 billion, but when all the people for claim it, it might increase in pension by $1.
Everybody will get $18,000 a month.
It sounds like the 18,000 promise. No, me not try play the politics yet, you know. No, that's why I know a trick when I see it. And Nancy will always know a trick. But just come on, listen to me I say. Me not fight it, you know. I'm saying when you come to say 50 billion is available for investment in more risky investments, the returns on that 50 billion when disseminated among the pensioners is immaterial to the pensioner. And it's the risk have increased, but the returns is immaterial, even if, let me explain why. The bond market competes with the loan market, am I correct? Meaning the banks. Save funds exist. Once you have an increase in the supply of funds, then it likely should drive down the price of funds, which is called the interest rate. Talk to me.
Yes, yes.
The reduction in interest rate, therefore, means that the returns, there's a less returns on the money. So the returns on bonds as is, when the supply don't include 50 billion, would likely decrease when the 50 billion enters into the market. That reduction means that you're almost nowhere. So what's the return? So let me ask Senator Gale, because you spoke to pension, you know, we're all in support. Releasing 50 billion, who is it for? Who's the target? If the worker was the target, mandatory pension would be before us.
Serious thing.
But the worker is not the target. If the worker was the target, the defined benefit would be before us. In fact, we'd have been making it illegal to switch from defined benefit to defined contribution if the worker was the target. Who are we doing this for? Because I can only judge if it is good when we know for whom. Because it's good for the business. But I don't see the great contribution to the pensioner. So the discussion we're having now is really, does the economy need 50 billion to be freed to investors? And we might say yes, but don't disguise it as if the pension needs 50 billion to take more risk. The role of government is to protect the money of the pensioner. Sometimes I come with us and make PSA say it's just so impressive. I like when she's impressed. Like she never look at it that way. I like it. What I'm saying is this. Yes. My good friend says, no, there are benefits, you know. For example, diversity is one of the ways that you reduce risk, to be able to diversify what you invest in. And that is our... They say that's our socialist business. The laws of the land. The laws of the land make it impossible to be a socialist businessman. You cannot be profitable with a conscience in this country. Because the competitor next door will always have a lower price. And the consumer around the road will always buy at the cheaper price. If you want to pay more than minimum wage, you can't be profitable. Because you cannot compete on price. If you want to offer a pension, you cannot be profitable. Because next door not offering a pension. If the worker was the target, then we'd have mandatory pension. That means the man with the conscience is not at a disadvantage when competing with the man without a conscience. you can't be a socialist businessman. And that's unfortunate for the country. Because what we need now is that there must be greater benefit to the greater majority.
But I agree.
But we don't have to call it socialism.
Yes.
You call it what you want to call it. But what we want now, what we have now, as Bernie Sanders says, we have socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. That's what we have. We have 50 billion, what lower risk to the borrower, and 50 billion at higher risk to the pensioner. That's what we currently have. And we have to keep in the forefront. Well, that is what it allows. To go in the bond market, it never allowed it before. It's higher risk. To borrow without having collateral, that's lower risk. This is not for the pensioner. This is for the businesses that have been clamoring for more money to be made available to them. And when we come with these bills, we should highlight who it is for, so that the analysis can be more truthful and be more legitimate. We look forward to debating Senator Brown's motion for the workers. But I'm begging that we accept that 5% being allowed or freed up for the bond market is not for the worker. It is for the businesses. And that is why we continue to say we're doing a lot when the people are benefiting very little. That is why the poverty figures are showing that with all the things that we're celebrating to have achieved, 521,000 Jamaicans are living on $250 a day, $75 a meal. That is an unfortunate circumstance. So, in closing, Mr. President, I want us to be clear that these regulations before us are regulations that allow money to be available for those who are seeking capital for investment, but has very little benefit for those who are investing capital for their pension. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Crawford. I was waiting to hear whether you are a businessman or a socialist businessman, a capitalist businessman, one with a conscience, one without, but you never went down that road. Thank you, Senator Crawford, although you have left. Senator Knight, stay there now. Yeah. Thank you, Senator Hill.
Mr. President, I rise to support this bill, and I'm very pleased to do so. Congrats to...
It's not a bill.
Sorry, the regulations. I thank you, President. Will you... You see, they put you in they elevate you into a position. They elevate you into a position that you know can manage. Just relax, man. I'm coming there. Here's a paper. At all. Only you know. Mr. President, thank you so much. Mr. President, thank you for hearing me. And I'm pleased to support this bill and to support. I did say regulation, and he didn't hear. I'm pleased to support the regulation, and I'm so happy, that Minister Clark and the administration has seen it fit to put this bill together, this regulation together, and to put another $25 to $50 billion in the market. I am very pleased to speak after Senator Crawford, because the regulations, the way he presented what he read in the regulation is amazing to me. It is so simply one-sided. He said these regulations are to provide money for investors and nothing for the pensioners. I want to show you how wrong he is. Mr. President, this country has gone through two significant haircuts called JDX and NDX, and for better or worse, they were bipartisan haircuts by the time we finished. In other words, people who held government paper took a significant loss, which was unusual in our history, but still a major loss. People were told, pension funds were told. I was a trustee on a pension fund, one of the biggest ones here, for a very long time. Everybody was told, when you invest in government paper, your money is safe until JDX and NDX wiped out a significant portion of what people held. So Senator Crawford, in saying that, look, this is not to help pensioners, really doesn't quite understand, because what it does do, and I'm pleased for this, but I'm not happy as to how far it has gone, and I'll get to that. It is now allowed at a time when the government of Jamaica has made it clear by agreement and by pronouncements that we are moving in the direction of putting our debt to 60% of our GDP. We're now at 98%, down from 147. That means that the government is getting out of the private sector market, sucking money out, usually to waste it, because government wastes a lot of money, both sides. You're not disturbing me, Senator Brown. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do that, Senator Brown. So what the government has said is that we are reducing the amount we borrow, and therefore the pension funds and insurance companies and others have no place really to put the money. So Minister Clark wisely said, hey, I'm going to raise that cap in which you can put unsecured debt to 5%. 5%, it's about, let's say, at the high end, $50 billion. $50 billion is a percentage of 607 or so billion in pension fund, is manageable. Okay? So it's a good percentage to manage and get the market used to investing in places where they never invested before. So for that, I really compliment the government, and it's a very good move. It also is a great move in that investors, young investors, like that capital investor, Senator Crawford, who is now a major businessman, a capital investor. I didn't call him a capitalist yet, you know. I'm getting there. But as a capital investor, he now has more money from the financial institutions and pension funds in which he can draw to expand his business. And although he talks about not employing a lot of people, he can't spend that kind of money in Jamaica in the poultry business or whatever business he's in and not employ some more people. We look at Senator Brown and I rarely ever agree, but we have one agreement today. Major agreement. Yet they might expel you from that place in which you're associated for so long. And not the union. I'm not talking about the union. That other place. So here is what we agree on, Mr. President. There are far too few workers that are covered by pension schemes in this country. Senator Coven Gale said the same thing. I'm really passionately believing that this has to change. Over the past 3 or 4 years, we've had quarterly increases of about 3 or so % in the pension size that we have in the country. We still have only, Mr. President, 9.8% of our private sector employees in pension schemes. That is almost criminal. We must change that. We must change that. People, taxi people, farmers, it's not beyond us. We have economists with PhD over that side, and we have great lawyers on this side. It's not beyond us, Mr. President, that we can craft a scheme to include these people. But I have good news for you. The FSC is indeed looking at a micro pension scheme to make sure people can be incorporated. You asked about that, Senator Brown. I checked. The FSC is working on that, and we need to bring in a lot more ordinary Jamaicans that can have pensions when they retire. Which takes me to my next point. Mr. President, I am personally,
Can't get the answer to that on Apple Watch.
as an investor, it must be something from a great firm called Apple. Somebody's phone is talking as well. So I'm very passionate, Mr. President, that we do not have enough protection for pensioners. This is what I mean. You invest all that money in government paper. Government took their haircuts, and by bipartisan effort, we're now in a better place. And they paid it back. And they paid it back. They didn't give it back. They paid it back. So now, Mr. President, I want to give you an example as to how short-sighted we have been in Jamaica. And I've been pressing, I'm telling you clear, I was the Minister of Finance, and I interacted consistently with the Bank of Jamaica. We have been short-sighted in this measure. Apple Company, Mr. President, when the tax law was changed recently in the United States, they paid about $38 billion to bring back $256 billion from overseas back to the United States. That's one company. $256 billion, Mr. President. Let's take our GDP at $15 billion. Our GDP is less than 6% of that amount that Apple brought back. Apple's net worth is bigger than that $256 billion. Mr. President, it is almost impossible to get pension funds in Jamaica, to get approval to get pension funds to invest in Apple's stock. We need to change that. We need, as we move to make sure more pension funds can invest on stocks on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, and some even unlisted in due course, we need to make sure we broaden the place so that when you can say that our government balance sheet is stronger than some of those companies, and yet our pension funds can't invest in them. I'm making the point. They can go up to 5%, but even that, Senator Brown, you have to go get some written permission. You can't do it offhand, just like that. Okay? So we need to make sure our pension funds are stronger, so that when, for instance, something were to happen in Jamaica, it's balanced somewhere else, but we define what kind of securities they must invest in. First class, AAA stuff, and Apple and Google and those guys qualified there, and JP Morgan. So it is in that respect I think we need to expand that in Jamaica. Poverty, Mr. President, something that we on this side understand and push for, and made it clear in our campaign that we want to move people from poverty to prosperity. And we have moved, we now have the highest employment of people in this country, in the history of this country. We have nothing to be ashamed about. We have nothing to be ashamed about. What wage? They never had wage when they weren't employed on some other side. So I'm saying to you, Mr. President, we now have, in 2015, we had poverty increasing to a very high level, to a point where, Senator Brown, your side wouldn't publish the poverty numbers. We were looking for them, trying hard to find them, and you wouldn't publish. We are before.
Show him, Senator.
Before.
Show them, Senator.
Before the Minister of Finance, Dr. Clark, got the numbers that you're referring to, you know what he did? He went into his budget and in boost path, in push up path by billions of dollars. So path has money to spend and take care of those people who might be having a little difficulty. But we understood that. And therefore the path investment, Senator Knight, to explain to you, the path investment, clearly an investment lags before you feel the effect. The effect, don't worry, the effect is coming. The investment is there, put in by Dr. Clark and this government. So I'm saying to you, while we feel about that poverty, while we understand that poverty exists, we're doing everything that we possibly can to employ them, to employ people, and to make sure we give them a safety net. And then speculative investment, Senator Brown. Yeah, man, government. Senator Brown, speculative investments. It's something that I've had to jostle with intellectually and practically. On a day-to-day, you don't even talk about investments. That's something I know. When I speak on that, you should be quiet. So, speculative investments, only him, man. You know you and I guys are afraid. It's only him. Him take me on. Speculative investments, Senator Brown, as I was saying. The reason why the FSC and the other regulators refrain from defining it is because, frankly, to get a realistic definition is near impossible. What is speculation to you might be a normal investment to me and vice versa. It depends on our risk appetite. To define speculative investment in a situation like this is you're opening up a box that you can't really satisfy. So you're going to have professional trustees who are well-trained, who have fiduciary responsibility that is clear and transparent, and they follow that to make sure that you reduce the speculation. No, it does. It does, because trustees are there. In the final analysis, when we make any law or make any regulation, you're going to have to depend on human beings to execute them. So we must choose them properly, and we must make sure they're accountable transparently. And that's what we're doing. But Mr. President, as I close, I want him to hear, as he looks at his phone, that people in Jamaica today are better off by far than they were 3 years ago. No question, no ifs, no buts, they're better off. Employment is up, unemployment is down, path benefits have increased, people are better off by almost any measure you take. Including people having money in their pockets. So, Mr. President, Mr. President, as a former trustee of the pension fund of one of the largest general insurance companies in Jamaica, I'm very aware and have a keen respect for the responsibilities of trustees and the fiduciary care each trustee must be very careful to apply. It is with that knowledge, with that experience, that I strongly support these regulations today. Thank you very much.
Mr. President,
Thank you very much, Senator Hill.
Mr. President? Okay.
Senator Skefford.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, it's a dangerous thing in life when one spreads the propaganda and you believe you win propaganda. Very, very, very dangerous. And so far, my colleague Senator Hill, to be here today, I'm addressing Senator Hill. For him to be saying that people's life are better after 3 years is indeed a myopic viewpoint. I need to go out there and observe people living. You see, too many of us reside in the corporate area. But is it also that the senator is saying that was presented by the cabinet issue June 10th is not so? Signed by the Honorable Prime Minister. We can have it both ways, you know. We can have it both ways, Mr. President. So if the Honorable Prime Minister, first among equals, head of the cabinet, sends a summary of the cabinet issue and has stated that the poverty rate has increased in 2017. Now, you see, the challenge you have for that pensioner that can't buy the medication today, whether it was better or worse off in 2015, that pensioner has a serious issue. And so let us sometimes get out of this comparative mode and just understand some of the realities. I'm going to use so long I learn. Right? So, and let's us not boast about leave, but it would be sad of you if you couldn't navigate the train on the rails with the excellent platform that was left by the former administration. So it takes simple knowledge to continue the navigation. So, Mr. President, I've also here, when we talk about poverty, and then our answer is what we have done to increase part benefits and the number of persons to part. The challenge with part, though very important, in itself is an indication that we're not doing well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's an indication. And let us understand that on both sides. It's a very good social intervention program to take care of our poor and vulnerable. But we want to create an economy that will empower our people to get gainful employment and can contribute to their own development. That's what we must seek to do. No, I'm just amplifying the voice to make the point. And you see, we need to start off some serious debate around some serious issues. So boasting to me that we have increased part benefit is no comfort. And let us face the fact. Sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months elapse and the poor people don't get it. Not just them, no, Senator Morrison, no. But let us face some realities. And in the school feeding program, we talk about 5 days under part program. It's not happening. These are the realities that we must continue to overcome, you know. But don't put on that mirage around your face to believe that all is well. It is not so. People are hurting. And we're talking about a pension regulation. I have had experience at the pharmacy. Real observation. Retired teacher over 30 years. Giving the health card and the prescription. And when she got the cost of the prescription, they said to the pharmacist, give me 2 weeks supply. Teacher of 30 years. So these are the realities that we face, and let's be frank, might be across administration. But let's not come here and behave that all is well. Because sometimes I bring a different rural perspective, and we don't believe it's genuine. You know from Barbara Green, Senator. You know. You know. There are pensioners as we speak today. Can't fill the prescription.
I'm saying that good teacher better off.
There are pensioners today who getting that light bill or that water rate and crying. If they don't get that little backup from the children or the grandchildren, they can't survive. That's the reality. And for them, there's no prosperity.
And him say them better off.
So let us understand.
Prosperity for rural.
Also, in the scheme of things, as we discuss and debate this regulation today, there are still too many workers, and many speakers, senators have said it before, that is not on a pension scheme. We are now starting to focus on the district constables, and we need to get them fully in that. Security guards, that was mentioned. What about the fast food workers? Many of them, hours of night, many hours in the day, they serve efficiently. They have nothing called pension. They don't know if I'm talking on that. And I'll speak of another group. There are many parliamentary workers, not directly employed to the parliament, get paid by the parliament. Drivers of MPs/ministers. They work for years. I have a friend of mine who worked for a particular MP for 23 years. And when he left in 2016, he called and cried tears. No man, you see you're focusing on the wrong thing. I'm talking about people's life. So there are certain time when certain issues, don't deal with it. No man, I'm the president, thank you. No, but no. This is a serious issue. No man, there's no prosperity in your mind, and that's my myopic. And what I'm saying, and the clerk of the parliament, Mr. President, something that we need to look in. Many of them, and the constituency office staff that are paid by parliament, but they have no pension. It's a real issue I'm talking about, and this Honorable Senate must deal with it. So you work for an MP for 22 years, you get your pay. Excellent treatment. But at the end of the day, except that one. But you leave without a pension. How we can include that category of worker into the scheme going forward? And that's why the real debate, and that's why Senator Brown's motion is important. How can we have a national pension scheme to benefit all categories of workers? So we need to focus on that, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, while we will support this regulation, let us not believe that there are not a risk factor. There's not a risk factor to it. And ultimately, I've been said that many times the workers will bear the negatives, the disadvantages, and the business players will gain the larger profits. Let us understand that has to be a balancing act. So I want to encourage, one, that whatever investment we have should be more aligned to the profile of the workers. This is about the workers, not the businessmen. So the investment that they will so seek to do must be aligned to the profile of the workers. And it must be more long-term rather than shorter. So you get the benefit over a period of time. I also want to ask, where are we now with the second phase of the pension reform? But we have completed phase one. Where are we with the second phase? And we need it sooner rather than later, so we can complete the pension reform for our public sector workers. I also want to recommend an increase in the non-tax threshold for contributions to the pension scheme, and to allow persons to be a part of more than one pension scheme. Very important that we give them that option. We spoke about pension portability. It's critical that we discuss that, we implement it, but I want to say it should be optional. So the workers must have that option if they so desire. And government need to also make pension schemes mandatory once businesses are established and of a certain size. So we must protect our workers in this regard. Mr. President, as we seek to pass this regulation amendments, as we seek to pass these regulations and the various amendments, we must also bear in mind that we can unlock more capital by making pension legislation stronger and more protective for our workers. At all times we need to protect our workers. We can also unlock more by making pension funds mandatory, as I said earlier on, and must be mandatory for all categories of workers. And in this context, I want to ask how this regulation impact on the NIS. So Minister, you need to give us some answer to that in your closing. Right?
Allow the NIF to invest too.
Mr. President, we need to ensure that the surpluses are not seen as an ATM for big companies.
Yeah.
Right, but must be there to continue to provide and protect our workers. And we hope that this is not a pie in the sky concept or activity or a scheme, and not be seen as unlocking capital to serve the interests of big businesses rather than that of the workers. So we need to genuinely assess the risk factor, put in measures to mitigate against the potential risk. Because we must never have a scheme that we give these resources to investors, and at the end of the day, the workers are worse off than they were. We must never have that, and must always seek to protect our workers. So we must always do a risk analysis in the best interest of the industry and, more importantly, our workers. Pension funds are doing well generally. So while we move to broaden the scope, we must not be as against the gains that we have made. We must protect the gains while we seek to increase the overall fund as we move forward. So, Mr. President, as was said before, we on this side generally support the regulation. I've always wanted to ensure that our pensioners currently can survive. Many of them are not surviving, as we said before. Many of them retire in the year 2000, for example, and what might have seen as a relatively good monthly pension as a result of inflation over the many years is very, very, very difficult to survive. We need to look out for those. So I don't know if we can, in our scheme and the regulations, our laws can be revised to peg the pension that they get on a monthly basis to that of the inflation rate. But we need to ensure that we always revise what they're getting. Because if we are to protect the vulnerable, these persons are able to build the society that we are now leading. And how we treat our elders and our children give us an indication as to the quality society that we want to build. And our objective at all times, whether we seek to have prosperity or enhance the progress, is to ensure that our citizens all can live a quality life and enjoy the good life that they dream of and that they deserve. And when they retire, they do so in an atmosphere of peace, love, and unity. Mr. President, we support it. I thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Skeffrey, for amplifying those ideas. Senator Charles.
Yes, Mr. President.
Minister Charles.
Senator will do. It's fine. When I'm...
No, KD is the leader.
No, that's a senator. Mr. President, we, as usual, have a robust Senate. And I want to firstly and very seriously thank my colleagues again for their contributions, and more, perhaps it is because we are no longer to be seen as a fledgling Senate anymore. We have crossed over the that mid-phase, but we definitely are seeing much more constructive participation, and I want to thank colleagues on both sides who have echoed similar sentiments, supporting what can only be seen as a critical regulation underpinning this government's thrust towards macroeconomic stability. Mr. President, a number of issues have been raised, and a number of issues have been addressed already. And I would take this opportunity also to highlight that we benefit in this chamber from colleagues who bring a level of experience and wisdom to the various debates. And I thank Senator Hill for his contribution in particular, as someone who not only is speaking on this in theory, anecdotally, but he himself has participated as a distinguished trustee in the practical expertise. And so he brings that understanding to the debate. And you would have heard that in his clarification of many of the issues that were brought up by our colleague, Senator Crawford. Mr. President, I want to just highlight a few issues. I believe that Senator Hill already sufficiently treated with the issue of speculative investment, and he also dealt with the issue of micropensions. Micropensions, just to extend that a bit, is aimed to address not only increasing the number of contributors, but also the level of contributions made. And so our regulators, the FSC, are embarking, Senator Hill and colleagues, on a project to assess the suitability of this framework for our country, to see that measures are put in place to amend the existing legislation, to determine the methods to educate and re-socialize persons to invest in a pension, and to determine mechanisms that will allow for the ease of the contributing. So that is very important, particularly as was raised a while ago by you, Senator Skeffrey, and the importance, and I think it was echoed by all of us really, the importance of ensuring that whatever measures we put in place today not only expand the pool for investment, but that it achieves the goal of really reaching the pensioners, the people who we are here to serve. And so we have to also make it clear to those listening to us that currently any Jamaican not in a pension plan can still participate, as you know, in an approved retirement scheme. And so I don't want anyone to leave with the impression that if they're not eligible for this, then it means there's no route for them. There's still the approved retirement scheme that would cover all categories of persons that you listed, but it is still critical for us to discuss the issue of the micro pensions and other mechanisms that will be used to really drive the awareness and to create that environment where persons can have access to equitable access to the pension scheme. Senator Brown made his contribution and raised some issues which I just want to address as well, Mr. President. Regarding 36A, Senator Brown, the investment managers will be subject to criminal sanctions. And I think if you look on section 47, yes, of the principle, you will be sufficiently satisfied. The section speaks to any administrator, investment manager, etc., and talks about summary conviction before a resident magistrate to a fine not exceeding $1 million. So if you look on section 47, that will address that issue. And you also raised some concern relating the surplus distribution. I believe we had already articulated, but I will repeat that those issues must be approved by the regulator. So the Financial Services Commission will be treating with those issues in terms of how that is addressed upon winding up of the scheme. And so the treatment of surplus will also, in addition to that, be addressed in the broader comprehensive phase 2 discussions. As you know, a lot of what we raised here today are critical issues, raised also by Senator Gale, raised by yourself and other colleagues. Many of those issues will be dealt with in that broader comprehensive phase 2 amendment. What we're doing today is really, as you know, to really push and fast track so we get the ball moving in the right direction. So we take note of it. Again, one of the things that you have stressed, and I think Senator Gale has consistently, perhaps it is the trade union expertise in both of you, but you have also consistently, Senator Gale, brought up the issue of timelines, and you have been consistent in ensuring that even from the government side, what we submit to the country in terms of the bills and such that will assist, the regulations must come in time for that action to reach our people. And so target dates have been set. I know that Minister Clark is pushing for them to be done by this year, and I would say at latest early quarter 2020. Another issue was raised, colleagues, as it relates to the consultations. And I know that there was a response from Senator Gale in delineating and really detailing a number of groups with whom there was consultation. I just want to also say that the proposed amendments were even placed on the FSC website for public viewing, and comments were welcomed and received in that regard. It is also critical for us to note that as we move along with these comprehensive discussions in the phase 2, that the consultation has to continue and has to be broader rather, and expanded. And so the comments in that regard have been well accepted, and I believe will also assist in how we structure our development of the phase 2 process. Senator Skeffrey, you mentioned something a while ago. Yes. You mentioned a while ago how this would relate to the NIS, correct? Which is our mandatory pension arrangement for all employed Jamaicans. And so I know the FSC doesn't regulate that, but I believe that that is part of what we can perhaps have as discussions as we move forward. But it's not regulated by the FSC. So these amendments to the investment regulations are perceived to be modest, and the increased risk should be manageable. Risk is something which was also raised, and President, colleagues, what this is seeking to do in addressing the issue of risk is to manage the risk. And so as you go through the regulations and you couple it with the legislation, you will see that great care has been taken to ensure that the vehicle is one that not only expands the permissible pool of assets, but focuses on ensuring that they are treated with in the most professional manner, the most competent manner, so that we increase the capital investment and increase the benefit to those that we are here to serve. And as I said, we will continue the consultations, and I want to again, I did it before, but it is critical for us in closing, and I do this on behalf of all of us, all 21 of us, in thanking the FSC, the technical experts, the members of the Ministerial of Finance and Public Service, the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, all of the members from both sides, and all of those stakeholders, the persons like Senator Hill, who are experienced and who have not just read the bill, but have participated and been a part of the development of pension scheme, and who has given freely, not just to the Senate, but of his experience, and others. We want to really thank them. Our goal, Mr. President, as a Senate, is to ensure that as a review chamber, we provide the best legislation and regulation for the operation of these schemes to the benefit of our people. And I think that we are achieving that. today. So I thank my colleagues for their contribution. Mr. President, in that regard, the pensions, superannuation funds, and retirement schemes investment amendment regulations 2019 resolution is hereby submitted to this Honorable Senate for confirmation.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thanks. Thank you very much, Minister, and thanks to all who have participated in this debate. And the question is that this resolution moved by Honorable Minister Charles be approved. Those in favor? Against? Thank you very much.
Mr. President, before we close, I just want to take the opportunity. I hope I'm taking the opportunity at the right juncture. But I just want to take the opportunity on behalf of the senators to just wish everyone, as we take a break in our sittings, all the best. I don't even know if it can be called a summer holiday, because I believe that all of us will be continuing our work. But until we resume, I do wish everyone good blessings, and that we utilize the time that we have as best as possible to really make some considerations of connecting with family. I say that, Mr. President, as over this past week, I've been reminded time and time again, in very many instances, how easily we can fall into the unfortunate circumstance of just doing our work. Family is critical.
Yeah, I just interrupt you. I was noticing that Senator Brown said he spoke to his wife last week.
Yeah. But it's a very important thing, Mr. President, and I choose as part of I just reiterate it, Mr. President. I know that our colleague Senator Morris recently celebrated his milestone, another milestone of another year of life, and we congratulate and celebrate with him as well. He, he didn't make it to September, but he's not too bad. Not too bad. But yes, Mr. President, and as he celebrates that, or has celebrated it, I just say to all of us as colleagues to take the time as we rest to try to see that we can connect with family. We are doing our service on behalf of Jamaica, and so we also want to thank all of the staff that are here for the work that they continue to do, and we wish you all the best until we resume.
Thank you. Senator Knight, I recognize you as acting pusher.
Yes. As the acting leader of opposition business, clap, I'm the acting leader. I join with the acting leader of government business in wishing the staff a very pleasant break from your duties. We are all pleased with how you have performed. And as for the colleagues, certainly from this side, we hope that you get some rest, and that we hope that you enjoy the break. There are occasions here in this chamber when business has been conducted in a very pleasant way. And I think that we achieve more. We achieve more when we are pleasant amongst each other and we concentrate better on the business before us. I think that we can say that for the session being concluded now, that we did indeed do quite a bit of business in the Senate, and all for the benefit of the people of Jamaica. So with that, I hope that all of us collectively enjoy the summer break. As for me, I'm going to be missing one thing, in that I shoot birds, even though my colleague John Jr. say that I shoot at birds. I don't shoot them. This summer, I won't be able to enjoy that as much as previous summers. But please, have some fun, laugh, be merry, and enjoy, and look forward to seeing, I almost said you.
Thank you very much, both Senators Knight and Charles. And I echo and embrace all the sentiments expressed concerning the functioning of the staff of this Parliament. And I add my thank you, and especially to our clerk, Ms. Cook, who had some health challenges but has returned to us blooming. And we look forward to spending some more time and more fruitful time during the year to come. I thank also all the senators on both sides who, to a large extent, have made my job extremely pleasant, and we look forward to that continuation. As we approach this holiday, I just ask the members to remember that we are celebrating emancipation and independence of this country. The nation is welcoming on Tuesday the President of Kenya, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta. Most of us might not recall or might not know the contribution that his father, Jomo Kenyatta, played in the decolonization of Africa, and the role played by Mr. Dudley Thompson in defending him. So he's coming here on Tuesday, and as a nation we welcome him and his wife. I can say that I know as a fact that some effort has been made to link Mr. Thompson's family with Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, which I think is a good thing. Minister?
President, it is not intended to do any further business, and so we ask that we have the suspension in the Senate until a date to be fixed.
Thank you, Minister. The question is that the Senate be now adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Aye. Against? This Honorable Senate now stands adjourned.
The corrupt are getting away too often. Help catch them now. Jamaicans must call 1-800-CORRUPT.
Yes!
Enforce the law. One law for all. If convicted and found guilty, lock them up. It's our money that's being wasted. Lock them up. Stop the corruption. Build integrity. A message from National Integrity Action.
As long as you are beautiful on the inside, everything else falls into place. You're always beautiful on the outside as long as the inside is beautiful.
I really think that beauty is, forming an independent but positive conclusion of who you are as a person.
Like how you have the diamond in the rough and you take it out of the dirt and you brush it off. I need that, boo. So you don't have to be a sparkly thing. And then them say, everything with glitter is gold or is beautiful. So you don't have to be this shiny thing or this sparkly thing that the world perceives beauty to be.
Beautiful is how you love, is how you treat others. It's about an independence that you have. It's knowing within yourself that I am beautiful, and it's not because of how I look, but it's because of the type of person, the caring, loving, compassionate person that you are.
Once you replace negative thoughts with positive ones, you'll start having positive results. Educate yourself.
Start your day with some encouragement from New York Times best-selling author and practical Bible teacher Joyce Meyer.
God is not mad if we've not arrived. He's just happy that you're here today wanting to learn more.
You'll be refreshed and strengthened as you hear powerful messages of hope and transformation.
God, I want you to lead me and guide me, and I'm going to do what you want me to do. I don't care what it costs.
Hi, Mas Errol. How you do?
Not too bad.
This was so interesting in the paper today, Mas Errol.
Enough things. Did you know that the EU has been doing a lot of work in Jamaica?
Who is the EU again, Mas Errol?
The European Union. A group of European nations that come together to promote social and economic progress and peace across the world.
For true? Newspaper is all well and good, but I bet I can find more information from the internet. I know just the person to call. Hi, Minister.
Minister.
Hi, Jody. Hi, Errol. What can you tell us about how the European Union has been helping Jamaica?
Over the past 43 years, we have received approximately 1.2 billion euros, and this has run the gamut of a number of developmental programs. A particular area of support has been in the area of agriculture. The EU has provided grant funding and support funding for sugar-dependent areas.
Between 2006 and 2017, the EU provided some 23 billion Jamaican dollars to help people living in areas that are dependent on sugar. Under the AMS, 397 houses have been built for residents. This replaces the old barracks-type housing in which they used to live.
The condition of the barracks were completely rough.
No light,
no water.
We never have any transport. The bathroom is outside and the toilet was a pit toilet.
We never have no tank, we have a tank. The lights are here, the bathroom inside, the kitchen inside.
Thank God for the benefit we have right now.
Nearly 200 miles of roads have been built or reconstructed in the parishes of St. Catherine, St. Thomas, Trelawney, St. James, Hanover, St. Elizabeth, Westmoreland and Clarendon.
Based on the roads that we did, it has created some form of ease for the truckers. Citizens of the area, they also benefit from the road.
More than 2,000 SDA residents have received vocational training.
The center would have been equipped to the tune of over 7 million Jamaican dollars to purchase various forms of training supplies and equipment across 3 skill areas: apiculture, bartending, and cosmetology.
I have been receiving training in various areas such as facial, massage, nail.
They have helped me to be certified and I can now earn an honest living from this.
The EU provided over 100 million Jamaican dollars in new business grants to residents in sugar-dependent areas.
Thanks to the EU for giving me this injection of 1,000 chickens, the feed and medication.
I received $1 million and it makes me into a woman that I am today.
The EU's AMS program has also funded extensive improvement to health facilities.
We expand the waiting area, operational space for our doctors and nurses.
The staff morale, it has improved because you're better able to work with more privacy.
With the funding, we're able to open this section we call the male ward. It is marked improvement over what it was.
You feel comfortable, feel like at home.
Enhancement of educational facilities.
I have assisted us in erecting an auditorium. We have a fully refurbished computer lab, and we have a library with over 300 books.
We got $11 million to build the facility, and it was a wonderful restroom for the school, and we appreciate it.
Upgrade of childcare facilities.
The funds were used to retile the bathrooms. We improved the plumbing area on the dorms, extended the kitchen and the dining room.
Conservation of the environment.
We embarked on a project here in Salt River, the Portland Biodiscovery Center. Funding has gone towards the erection of the building as well as the construction of the boardwalk.
Increased access to sporting facilities and the preservation of Jamaica's historical architecture.
We were fortunate to get funding for the rehabilitation of the building with computers and computer workstations.
The EU-Jamaica relationship has strengthened considerably in recent years.
Our contribution focused on building resilience, improving quality of life of people in the communities, and providing alternatives. I am absolutely confident that the strong and very constructive relationship that we have today, based on trust, based on partnership, will continue.
You see how the European Union partner with us?
You're right, Mas Errol. Life sweet of it true with the EU.
Hello, I'm Dr. Carlton Bird, Speaker Director for Breath of Life Television Ministries, and I want to encourage you to watch Breath of Life right here on PBCJ.
I am Jamaican.
I am J.F. Coastline.
I am an infantry soldier.
I am JDF Railway.
I am
a JDF soldier.
So here are the facts.
7 out of 10 Jamaicans die from a non-communicable disease.
Because we love our people and we want them to live better quality lives,
we, the Ministry of Health and our partners, are launching Jamaica Moves.
Jamaica Moves is a call to action to prevent non-communicable diseases.
By educating and encouraging Jamaicans to be active, eat healthy,
and start living 30 minutes at a time.
Because 30 minutes of physical activity each day, along with proper nutrition, can go a long way.
To prevent your risk from developing certain NCDs such as diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, and certain cancers.
And remember, it's life we're promoting. That's why you see me going hard right now.
I'm all about living.
So help us take this first step towards a healthier Jamaica so you can enjoy more moments, more memories, more life.